Welcome to your own podcast.
But you have to say my name.
Okay, that's right. Let's start over. Okay. Hey, Jonathan. That's right. Okay.
Stuff you developed at the Merrill Institute. Practical ways that people can put their hands on these experiences and these tools and these resources that they might not otherwise have had at their disposal readily, like baseball and glove.
Right.
Here are the things, easy things that you need to succeed. Hey, Don.
Hey, Jonathan. How are you, sir?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great.
So you're on campus because every Thursday there's an academic meeting and you have to be in it.
Yeah. So rather than just being in by Zoom, I'm coming up.
Okay. So this is a little bit of an interesting conversation that we're going to have because normally these conversations have been between like alumni or staff and faculty who've been here for a while. But you're actually pretty new to Central.
Very new, yes.
But I think actually the reason why I really wanted to have a sit down with you is because what you're doing with the school and the vision that you have for the school is really interesting. So I just want to like sneak preview that right now, and then we'll kind of like lay the groundwork and come back to it later.
Absolutely.
So, who are you and what are you doing here?
Yeah, great question. So Don Sanders, I am the new dean of the graduate school, and I've been in ministry my whole entire life. I've taught in undergraduate and graduate for decades, but always been primarily in the church, and then sort of my side gig has always been teaching at the same time.
What classes have you taught?
In the past, I taught languages, Greek, Hebrew, education stuff, and ministry, and Bible, those too. So have an undergraduate. One of my undergraduates is in Old Testament, so I love Old Testament and education and all those sort of things.
Yeah. But then you said, so you've done teaching as a side gig, but your primary focus and time has been spent in the church.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Yeah, so always been full-time. I've had started off, like many people, right out of Bible college last century, as people like to remind me. And so started off in youth ministry, did that for 4 years, right out of college. And then...
Where did you graduate?
St. Louis Christian College for my undergraduate. So
okay, now that's an interesting tie-in.
Yes.
And you have kids here. Oh man, there's like layers.
There's layers and layers of stuff. And I've known Dr. Fincher. We went to church camp together. So whoa. I've known him since we were like in elementary school.
What church camp was that?
Gasconade Christian Service Camp in Waynesville, Missouri.
Whoa.
So yeah, we've known each other for a long, long time.
All right, so you graduate from SLCC and you start in youth ministry.
And then we did that for about 4.5 years and then moved to Kentucky for a second ministry. And that is a whole other story in and of itself. The first Sunday we got to our church, we went to be the youth minister. Senior minister resigned on my first Sunday.
Wow.
And it was one of those things that, was thrust into this sort of chaotic situation. Spent the next 15 months or so just being on my own, leading. I'm a 26-year-old leading this church, had no clue what I was doing. We moved sort of across the country, had our first child, had all sorts of things, and it was just sort of life went completely haywire for us for about 2.5 years.
So, okay, so you went as the youth pastor. Did you end up becoming the senior pastor?
No, well, I was the interim.
Yeah.
But the plan was not to stay the interim. So at that time, I was actually going to grad school at the same time, and then we hired. Interestingly enough, the person we hired was actually the founding pastor of the church I would then go to, Harvester Christian Church. So my life has like all of these weird connections forward and backward. And then, so when he came on, we hired him. Then just about the time he came on, I realized I don't really want to do youth ministry anymore.
Whoa.
And so we moved back we got an opportunity to go back to Harvester Christian Church in St. Charles, and have been there for 27 years.
So I want to go back to Kentucky for a second. Okay. Because there's this reoccurring theme that I'm hearing with some conversations that we're doing with the sit-downs and with alumni. And we've got a couple other alumni who graduated like last year. And there's this, or 2 years ago, and there's this theme that keeps coming up of, I have no idea how to handle like situations that you walked into. And there's one thing to have like a biblical education, to know Greek, to know, what Paul was talking about in Ephesians, but it's another thing entirely to have these like soft skills of how do you navigate the politics and how do you navigate the church hurt and the, I don't know that situation, but, was there a sense of betrayal or like blindsidedness, and how did you guys walk through that?
Yeah, definitely no. It was just one of those situations where once we were hired, we realized the senior minister was leaving, and there was nothing untoward. He was moving to a different situation that was better for him, but it was certainly a surprise to us. And so you go through that, and I always say during those 2.5 years, if you've ever taken like one of those stress tests where they go, has this happened to you? Has this happened to you?
Okay.
It was like literally everything on that thing happened to me except like dying. Like we had health problems, we had financial problems, we had family problems. We just had everything in life could just go haywire in those 2.5 years. And it was one of those situations where I would never want to do it again, but I'm glad I did it. Just a lot of things. I'm glad I did that. I had that experience because I grew a lot. I learned a lot about myself, learned to trust God. A lot of things would never ask to do it again for sure, but it's a defining period in my life that sort of helped me grow as a leader for sure.
Can you think of anything in particular during that time in Kentucky when you were the interim leader that was especially like growth oriented for you? Like this thing really grew me.
Yeah. So we had one of our younger, now, so I'm 25, 26 at the time. We had what I would call one of our younger leaders who was probably a couple years older than me. I'm going to guess they were in their late 20s, maybe early 30s. Like this couple that were just sort of the life of the church and everything. And the lady very suddenly passed away. And just out of the blue, just this crazy sort of medical event. And I remember sitting with her husband in the emergency room while the doctors were sort of coming out and giving reports of like, we're trying to revive her or she's not coming back. And the doctor coming out and telling the husband she's gone. And I remember there sitting going, I literally have no clue what to do. No earthly idea what I'm supposed to say, how I'm supposed to react. What do I do? And feeling completely helpless. After the fact, even years later, and reflecting and talking on that, and even talking to the husband there, was like, the thing that you did for me was you were just with me.
Yes.
You were with me. And in fact, it would have been wrong to give any platitudes or, any sort of just stock answers, whatever. It's just like, I'm here to go through this with you.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that it taught me, that I learned about being in ministry is, and has really shaped my understanding of leadership is, you definitely want to know right things, right? You need to know Bible, you need to know leadership principles, things like that. But equal parts of knowing the right things is being the right person and having your heart in the right place, and also just understanding people with the right motivation. So when you take all of those things, I think that's what shapes a leader. And so it's because you can do the right things in the wrong way and leave a trail of relational destruction behind you as a leader. And you can go, well, I did the right things. I just destroyed people in the process of doing that. So leadership is equal parts. And that's one of the things I'm very passionate about is you develop skills, but you have to develop your heart as a leader. That's just as important as knowing the right head knowledge.
And I don't want to dip into it too quickly, but that's what you're bringing to the master's program, the Russell School of Ministry, in a sense. So we'll come back to that and talk
for sure.
about that. Was that your first funeral?
No. My first funeral was when I was actually in Bible college. And so I'm 19 maybe at the time. And my grandmother's husband, not my biological grandfather, but her husband, passed away suddenly. And on that sort of side of my family, they were not church people at all. So they didn't know anyone. Whoa. And so at 19 years old, I'm actually at this so crazy connection. So I'm at my weekend youth ministry, which is actually at the church that my wife's family was the minister at.
Okay.
So I was staying with my wife's family, even though we were not dating at the time.
Oh, okay.
So staying with her family, and then get a call. I was like, hey, he's passed away. So I went back home as a 19-year-old and did my first funeral for this. And it was kind of a surreal experience for sure. Again, you just know it's certainly you want to say the correct things, but it's not just about saying the right things. It's about having a transformed presence and allowing yourself to be transformed by the Spirit so that you can be sort of that presence there
for that
situation. Yeah, absolutely.
My first funeral, and I actually almost forgot about this. It's been a long time since I talked about this. My first funeral was at our second ministry, and it was a 12-year-old girl who accidentally killed herself doing like one of these TikTok trends.
Yeah.
Right? And I was the same thing. I was in the hospital room, like when they're like, there's nothing more we can do. Like they had her on life support, but they're like, we
have to make a decision. Yeah.
And that was the exact same thing. Like I was in this moment, like I had this thing where I was like, Jesus, should I pray for her to come back to life? Like I want to embrace, like, when Jesus says you'll do greater things, and I want to like step into that and be like, should I pray for resurrection? Like,
oh yeah.
But then I'm like, Holy Spirit didn't explicitly tell me to, and I don't want to cause more damage. Like I don't want to say, just like what you were saying, you can do the right things in the wrong way. And that was also huge. And I think that was a very similar lesson that I had learned, just to be present and to be, Yeah, and
a lot of that is just learning when to be quiet and literally just be a presence in the room.
Wow.
And, but this is really kind of taking a serious tone here, talking about funerals. But you think about ministry, it is, I always tell people, it's sort of my sort of joke. I'd rather do a funeral than a wedding, because I think funerals are the absolute most pastoral thing you can do. It is, at its most basic core, it is, I think being a pastor is walking with people through life, whatever that life is. And, I say at a wedding, nobody cares what you say as the pastor. Like the whole point of the wedding is to get done, right? Is like get through this part as fast as possible. But with a funeral, people actually listen to you, and you realize that people are asking for you to speak into this experience. And I think that's the most pastoral thing we can ever do.
Yeah. So you managed to get through Kentucky, and you said you go back to Harvesters. Did you start at Harvesters?
No, it was so the guy that we actually ended up hiring as the lead pastor in our church in Kentucky was also the founding pastor of Harvester.
Yeah.
So I'd been in the area before, and I knew some people on staff there, but went back to St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
But at Harvester, and was 27 years old. Was like, man, this is a great opportunity, and stayed there for 27 years. So,
man, 27. That's not quite a Moses ministry.
It's a long time, yeah.
What role were you filling when you first went to Harvesters?
I always say my first job was playing a lot of ping pong. It's a funny story because Ben Merrill was the lead pastor at the time, and Ben is a sort of rock star in the Restoration movement.
He's really old though, right?
He passed away.
Okay,
yes, a couple years ago, and just super influential guy. But he did this is one of my favorite Ben Merrill stories. He did a thing that only he would do, which is he hired two people for the same position. So Harvester was getting ready to hire this position that was sort of adult education and outreach sort of a thing, involvement. And they got to two of us, and he basically said, like, these two people are very different. One is very outgoing, sort of life of the party sort of a thing. The other one is very kind of bookish.
Which one were you?
Yeah, it was the bookish one. Bookish, kind of scholarly, this sort of thing. And so Ben was like, we can't decide which of these two we think would be. Let's just hire both of them and let them grow their jobs. Which was, I always say, I was one of two people who were hired for the same job, and then the other person ended up being tremendous friends, still friends with today. So it was very funny. We were very complimentary of one another in ministry, had very different gifts. And
was that a difficult dynamic to sort out?
No, because they came to us and said, okay, we're going to actually split the job into two, and we're going to have one be sort of this outreach involvement and one be education. Don, which one would you want? I was like, well, education.
But you ended up playing ping pong.
But that first, because it was my whole role was adult education minister, but my whole job was resourcing like 7 adult Sunday school classes. That's what it was, the whole role for like the first year. So you do your job like on Monday and Tuesday, and then you're like, well, what do I do the rest of the week? So we always joke, we played a lot of ping pong the first year. Then as the ministry grows, it obviously does that. But it was interesting days for sure.
Yeah. So I think it's so interesting because every once in a while in my life, I can think of like 2, maybe 3 instances, and you're the second or third instance where someone's like, oh, I do ministry with Ben Merrill. Because when I was like 9 or 10, he came and did a revival at my church. And I remember, like, it wasn't until I heard his name again, like, years later, I was like, oh, yeah, that's the guy.
That's the guy, yeah.
But it was at his, I couldn't tell you what he's talked about, but I just remember, I really know, I'm confident that was the experience I had that was like, I really need Jesus in my life.
Oh, I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
Just a fantastic just person, his presence and, felt, and just a humble leader that sort of followed God and just did amazing things. Right person at the right time in several different churches, and grew churches literally all over the country. And I mean, his they always talk about in the NFL, like the NFL coaching trees. Here's the people that came out of that system. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that would come out of Ben Merrill's sort of ministry tree, if you think about that. To trace it back to that.
But it's so interesting because, like, I had that encounter when I was a kid, but aside from 2 or 3 like random encounters where someone else will mention him, I've actually never like seen, like the Billy Graham revival. I've never seen anything like Ben Merrill, like, so that's just interesting.
Yeah, his ministry was he always worked, the churches that he served at grew very much. But then he had this heart for smaller rural congregations and spent all of his time going out and helping them. So not, very much an era of word of mouth sort of a thing. Wasn't on, obviously time before social media and things like that. So, but definitely had that reputation of sort of being everywhere, and, would preach dozens of revivals a year and things like that for decades.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. Very fortunate to have worked with him.
Yeah. You worked like in person with him.
Yeah. He hired me at Harvester, and then was there until he retired. And then they stayed at Harvester until he passed away a couple years ago.
Wow. So how long were you the young adults books guy?
Yeah, well, kind of forever. I had, when you're at a place for a long time, and the church is growing, your roles kind of shift. So I went from being sort of the adult education person to we had a campus that we relaunched. So then I went and became a campus pastor at our other campus for a while, and then came back and we launched the Merrill Institute, which was sort of our in-house Bible college at the church, and did that for a while, and then sort of got into the leadership development phase of it. So I've had several different roles at Harvester.
Did you grow up in St. Louis?
I grew up in southeast Missouri, so a little town called Potosi, so a couple hours away.
And you just wound up in St. Louis because of college?
Yeah, I went to St. Louis Christian College because the guy who was the preacher at my home church was a graduate of St. Louis Christian College.
Yeah.
And so it is just that personal influence.
Man, I'm not trying to get off topic, but there seems to be this decline in the churches to encourage people to go into ministry. And that's just too bad.
Yeah, it is. Ministry has definitely, in my 30-some years in ministry, has changed significantly. Of course, culture has changed significantly, and models of ministry change. I was talking to somebody the other day. It's like when I started in ministry, like we did things like they used to call it calling on people. Like you would just go out in the evenings and visit people and like show up at their house randomly and just, I'm just the preacher. I'm coming by to just sort of do a wellness check on you. And
it was welcome. And
you're like, you would never do that today. It's rare that you would, you would just probably not show up at somebody's house randomly.
Yeah.
And, ministry, just how you connect with people has changed so much. It's very different, but which I would say then is you still need that human touch. People crave that for sure.
100%.
But the way that we minister to people, and now you can do such specialized ministries, and you can take, I would say, like skills that you used to think this is not a ministry skill, but now churches use those, like communications and video and so many things that we would not, classically consider a ministry skill. Like I'm not a preacher or a teacher or something like that, but churches now use these other skills to help them in their ministry, which I think that's a great change in ministry for sure.
Yeah, becoming all things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just the way we have to connect with people, because society has changed. It takes a lot of different avenues and methods to really sort of stay connected, and you could minister to people online now. So, something 30 years ago we would have never thought about.
Yeah. So you're in St. Louis, and when you came to do an interview, you and I got to chat and connect a little bit, and we ended up on hockey.
Yeah.
But before we got to hockey, you were telling me about this new soccer team or something.
Yeah,
that you're into.
Yeah, I'm a huge soccer fan now. 5 years ago, I would not have said that.
Right.
In fact, I would have said the opposite. I used to think, and I will say it was out of ignorance, did not understand soccer, right? I didn't grow up playing it, right? My kids didn't play it, so it just was not part of our culture. But when they announced that St. Louis was getting a soccer team, I was like, because I support, all the St. Louis sports.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I need to figure this out because I want to be a fan of the team. And since then, have really, really grown to love it and enjoy it. And
out of all the sports options, would you say soccer's your favorite?
Yeah, baseball is still my favorite.
Yeah.
This is a bad time to be a Cardinal fan, but I still love baseball. I love football. I love hockey. I love them all the same. It's sort of the which is your favorite kid. It's
I guess.
It depends on they're all your favorite for different reasons and different things like that. And the great thing is that it's whatever time of the year it is, you've got one.
You got something.
You got something that you can root for and follow and do all those things.
Aside from soccer, were there any of the sports that you just became a fan of because you were in St. Louis?
Football, the funny thing about football, of course, St. Louis had the Cardinals first, and then it had the Rams for a while. And then both those teams left. And I went through this super nerdy, intricate process of figuring out what team I was going to root for after the Rams left. Okay. And it was sort of like, your girlfriend left, so I'm looking for a new one.
Right.
So it was like, what kind of qualities am I looking for? And one of the interesting things about like the NFL is you'll know people that root for teams that like don't have any connection to that city. Like that's one of the rare sports where a lot of times it's geography based. I grew up in St. Louis, so I'm going to root for these. But like people can root for NFL teams and you're just like, what's the connection to that? And there is no connection. It was just they were the good team in the 70s or the 80s, and that's why I rooted for them. And
I stuck with it.
So, my first favorite team were the Steelers back in the 70s. Terry Bradshaw and, all of that, and they were winning the Super Bowl. So that's where I sort of circled back around to rooting for the Steelers again.
But then we wound up talking about hockey because that's the only sport that I kind of care about. Because my wife is from Canada, and they were big hockey fans there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then she moved to North Carolina, where they are fans of the North Carolina Hurricanes.
The Hurricanes,
yeah. And that's my team.
That's okay.
But that's the only... Every other sport... So you're like talking about Rams, and I'm like... Or St. Louis having a football team, I'm like, I didn't know they had a football team.
Well, we don't right now. That's right. So,
but you said the Cardinals moved?
The football Cardinals, right? We're in St. Louis, and then they moved to Arizona.
But the baseball Cardinals are different.
Yeah, two different, same name,
weird.
different.
Okay.
Yeah, different.
That's how oblivious I am.
That's all right. Well, we need to introduce you to some of that.
The most exposure I had was the Iowa Cubs, which is the minor league baseball. And I got into that. I enjoyed it. I didn't get into it. You eat the hot dogs and you're out in the sun and hanging out with family. And
that's one of the great things about baseball is it is an experience. Yeah. Is that just being at the ballpark is an experience.
It's the American pastime.
It's the American pastime. And you can have so many great conversations while you're there because it's
so low-key.
It's slow paced. It is, you associate all these things with it, hot dogs or peanuts or whatever. It's usually a nice day that you go and...
Field of Dreams, man.
Yeah, and you can actually play catch, or play baseball.
That's true.
Hockey's different because I'm going to guess most hockey fans, unless you're from Canada, didn't play hockey growing up, probably. So you don't have that experience of actually playing hockey. Football, people do, for sure, and soccer.
So this might be a stretch, but I think that's actually a good segue to come back to RSM.
Yeah.
The Russell School of Ministry. You're talking about, you mentioned, people can play catch because that's easy access. Not everyone has access to hockey pads, ice rink. And in ministry, which I think you're bringing with you as the dean of the Russell School of Ministry, stuff you developed at the Merrill Institute, practical ways that people can put their hands on these experiences and these tools and these resources that they might not otherwise have had at their disposal readily, like baseball and glove.
Right.
Here are the things, the easy things that you need to succeed. So can you go back and kind of like set the stage of your time at the Merrill Institute that prepared you for what you're doing, what you're about to like really jump into here?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. The Merrill Institute really sort of came out of this idea that we had a lot of people on our staff that hadn't had a traditional Bible college education. And so it was like, how can we sort of catch them up on these basic Bible and theology things that we want our pastors to have? Now, lots of other people took advantage of that, which was great, and ended up, we had a lot of our mission partners, the people in their ministries from overseas, ended up taking the Merrill Institute. Wow. So we've had, people taking it from lots of other countries and things like that, which is really, really cool to get that interaction. But when you think about how that sort of translates to what we're doing now, I always say, like, you can study on your own. Like, you have a Bible, you can study it, you can have the books.
You can listen to a podcast.
You can listen to a podcast, right. And so... Here's what, like, my pitch for why I think people should go through a program like this is information is ubiquitous, right? It's everywhere.
Yeah.
You can find the information, right? So it's not about, you can read the
Access.
same book. It's not about access to information.
Right.
What it's about is having, and I love this phrase, it's not even original with me, but a curated experience.
Yes.
So it's the idea of saying, let's go back to your sort of sports analogy, right? You could walk into a baseball game and, if you don't know anything about it, you could sit there and go, well, I could try to figure this out on my own. But if you went with somebody who was really a big baseball fan and they go, let me explain this to you. Why are they doing this? What's that rule? What's the best way to eat this hot dog? All these sort of things, right? All these things that you'd have this curated experience of somebody that's walked through it before and go, yeah, let me help you not just give access to the information, but let me actually help you interpret the experiences. Let me help you think about these things in a way that perhaps you hadn't thought about them. Or let me help you make connections between these things because we've walked through this road before. And then for me, that's the power of doing something like the Russell School of Ministry, is you get to have people that have walked through that road before and go, yeah, you can read all the books. That's great. And that's important. But let me help you make sense and tie all these different things together in your life that perhaps you haven't thought of in that way.
And that's a radically different experience than just binging whatever you find on YouTube.
Absolutely.
And the value that prepares you for is something that you can't. It's like one of the problems that I had when I was younger was I felt like I saw what somebody else did and I was like, wow, they did that really, really well. And then I would learn for myself just enough that I was convinced I could do it as well as they did. And I couldn't. Like when I first came to Central Christian College of the Bible, I was here for one semester in 2005. And I was like, now I have enough to go do ministry. And I left, like I dropped out and I went and I started as a youth pastor. I lasted 1 month. And then I was wandering for 2 years after that until the Lord finally okay, get back into it and get back to the training, because it is such a different experience and it prepares you in such a different way than you inventing your own way to prepare yourself.
Oh, yeah. And there's so many examples you could tie it in. It's like we were talking in a meeting yesterday about, it's like going to a museum. Well, you can just look at all the stuff, but when you have a guide that can walk you through and say, let me give you the context of these things. This is why this piece is important, or this is why this is a really significant thing, and how these tie together, and here's the story behind all of that. And I view sort of as instructors, as professors, that's our job is, and again, I use this phrase all the time, you can find the information anywhere, but what you can't find is someone to help you make sense of the information.
Right.
And not just that, but also as sort of a third party outside to go, well, this is your situation and this is how you can relate these two things together and make sense of this, and have somebody who's walked through that experience, and just go, well, this is, maybe the idea is just need to sit there with the person rather than giving them information, go back to our first idea. And, you can learn all that stuff and you can stumble upon it, but the process accelerates when you have somebody that can guide you through that.
Yeah, that makes me think of the Jewish rabbis who, as much as I understand, I'm pretty ignorant and naive, but, from what I understand, a lot of the teaching and training came from asking questions.
Yep.
Right. And it's even Jesus did it, right? When someone would come and ask him a question, what I love is he'd be like, oh, that's interesting. Well, what do you think about that?
What do you think about that?
And he turns it back and he's like, okay, well, and then he kind of walks them through this, well, here's how you think about that and process that. I think that's really interesting. I know this is still pretty fresh and you just kind of stepped into this role as the dean. What's your vision for this thing?
Yeah, it is. I think there's obviously so much great that's already there. So you look at it and you go, let's figure out where things are already going well, and then obviously say, are there some other ideas that we can add into that? I know some of the priorities for me are going to be not just having well-crafted courses, right? Well-crafted experiences for people to do that. One of the emphases I want to bring is the idea that, to go back to one of the things we said earlier, you can know the right things, but if you're not the right person inside, and I think that when we talk about developing leaders, because it's a leadership degree, right? Developing leaders and training leaders is not just the information; it is also helping people and giving them experiences to transform their heart and their mind. And I think that's equally as important, because we can, you can just look at the headlines and you see leaders who know all the right things, but they fall off a cliff in their life because they think that leadership is just doing the right things or knowing the right things. And they don't tie in that idea that it's also being the right person and being that person that is transformed by the Holy Spirit. And so one of the emphases I want to bring is helping people understand that it's not just reading those books. It is allowing the Spirit to transform you in this very specific process. That we want to sort of carve out that space where people can have a transformative experience as a ministry leader that's much more than just an academic. That's important. It's incredibly important, but it's much, much more than that. And I think that you prepare people to endure those seasons of difficulty as a leader. And if you help me go, how do I let the Spirit work on me as I'm helping the Spirit work on other people?
Wow. That's interesting, because that requires a whole extra level of like intentionality, because there isn't just like a prescription for this is how you let the Spirit work on you.
Right.
Like, yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And I think the way that, the Spirit works on people is certainly individually, but also through relationships. And I think that's one of the things that the value of, again, going through a curated experience is that you develop relationships not just with your professors and instructors, but also with your peers as you're going through the program, and go, hey, there's someone else that's walking through this at the same time as me. So developing experiences, a course becomes just so much more than let's just get through this material. The course is this very intentional, I love that word too, intentional experience that combines not just the academic head knowledge, but it also provides this peer-to-peer connection and also this professor-student relationship that then allows, you're sort of carving out the space where the Spirit can work in this, and then allow that transformation that brings all those things together to you as a leader to then go back to your context and do what God's calling you to do there.
Yeah, and something that I'm seeing come out of the RSM is not just those like dynamics in the program, but then those lasting network connections.
Oh yeah.
And those, like, you become resources for each other after.
Yeah, for sure. Finished. There's nothing that, forges those bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood like shared misery of a grad experience, as I always say. It's not really misery, but, just that shared experience of going through something that's challenging, and it should be challenging. It should be challenging both intellectually, but also ministry-wise, but also personally, to really go, if you go through a program and you're like, I'm the same person I was when I went in.
What does it do?
What did you gain? You want to be challenged in all of those ways so that you look back on it and go, oh man, the totality of that was incredibly transformative for me as a person.
Yeah. That's it, man. I think that's it, and I'm actually really excited to see what you're going to bring to the table and how we're going to evolve this thing and take it to the next level.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being on here.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. And go Blues.
And that's the end.
There we go.